What's happening, guys? Cowboy here, and today we're going to do a video where we explain the soft cap of stats, or the point where you should stop leveling them, in addition to a discussion of the state of the meta for the game. Now, with the release of Dark Souls 3, the player base has grown considerably with a number of new players joining, and a term I'm sure a lot of you are hearing tossed around is the meta. So for those that don't know, the meta is the level agreed upon by the community as the typical stopping point when it comes to leveling up your character. Now, the primary reason for this is to ensure online connectivity for both co-op and PvP. But with that being said, we do have password matchmaking in Dark Souls 3. Now, although this is still being tested, what we do know for sure is that matchmaking in Dark Souls 3 allows you to connect at minimum with players 10 levels higher or lower than you, with your highest upgraded weapon also being a factor. When using the password feature, located over here, however, these restrictions are removed, and you could have a level 500 player with tons of max level weapons connect to a level 50 player, with the higher level player being downscaled. Since the aforementioned only applies when connecting to players using the same password as you, however, the meta is something important to consider when looking for more online play overall. So before we jump too much into the meta discussion, let's have a look at stats and discuss where you should aim to stop and why. Now, first up we have Vigor, and Vigor is going to dictate our total health pool in addition to frost resistance. Now, Vigor actually levels on a bit of a curve. As you can see, we get very large amounts going up to roughly 27, and then after we've hit 1000 HP, it begins to slow down considerably. So 27 is really the soft cap, if you will, for Vigor, but you can take this all the way up to about 50, at which point you'll begin to see heavy diminishing returns. As you can see, past 50, I'm only getting roughly 2 to 3 points per point of Vigor. So in general, if you want to have as much as possible, aim for 50 Vigor. Moving on from there, we have Attunement, and Attunement is going to impact both your FP gauge as well as your total attunement slots. As you can see, we get our first slot at 10 attunement, our second at 14, our next at 18, then at 24. Following that, we have 30, and then it's every 10 levels after. So we can see 40, we get another slot, 50, we get another slot, 60, we get another slot. And I believe the last slot actually is a little bit higher up. I think it can go up to 80, yeah, and then I believe it's 99 for your final slot, yes. Moving on from there, we have Endurance up next, which Endurance is going to govern your stamina in addition to lightning and bleed resist. Now, your Endurance, you want to aim to go all the way up to 40 on, and 40 is really where you'll stop to see good growth on the stamina. As you can see, we're getting plenty of points, and then once we hit 40, it begins to slow down. And you can actually get 10 more points of stamina going all the way up to 99, but that's a little bit overkill, so 40 is really where you want to aim to stop on your Endurance. Moving on from there, we have Vitality, which is going to govern your physical defense, poison defense, and most importantly, equipment load. Now, equipment load is very important in Dark Souls because depending on how or what your equipment load is at, that's going to determine whether or not you roll properly. So just to give you a better visual of what exactly I'm talking about, right now you can see with our equipment load and our weight ratio up top, we're at 73.8, and this will have us performing what's known as a fat roll. Now, during a fat roll, you have less iframes. It's a lot easier for enemies to hit you. So in general, you want to always aim to be below 70%. Right now at 69.9, you can see my roll is much faster, have a little bit more iframes, which is going to make it easier to dodge enemies. For those confused, iframes are also known as invincibility frames. It's basically a state where while your character is rolling, they are invulnerable to damage. Now, you can actually take this down even lower. If you get down to about 30%, you will have the what we call a ultra roll, where you can go even farther than normal. But in general, you just want to stay below 70, and as long as you're within that range, you'll be fine. So, jumping back in, now we're going to go into the offensive stats. So, Strength, of course, is going to be impact strength-based weapons, and on top of that, it also increases fire resist. You're going to get the best strength up to your best strength is going to be around 40. So once we hit, well, now that I hit the requirement for the Yorms, you can begin to see the scaling under attack power. But as you can see, going up to 40, I'm getting very large groups of strength. In the right weapon 1 slot, I have a weapon that's A scaling as strength, while in the right weapon 2 slot, there's a C scaling strength weapon. So you can kind of see the difference. So leveling up past 40, you can see the amounts that we're getting starts to decrease quite a bit, but we're still getting good levels, and that's going to go all the way up until 60. So now they're at 60, you can see we're getting very few increases on our right weapon attack power. A little bit more on the weapon that has higher scaling and strength, of course, but it has decreased quite a bit. So this applies for both strength, dexterity, and luck. All three of these stats, your first soft cap is going to be at 40, and your secondary soft cap is going to be at 60. In general, 40 is enough for those stats. For those aiming to do a quality build, you'd want to aim to go 40 in strength and 40 in dex to get the most bang for your buck. Dexterity weapons, or dex, of course, focuses on dexterity weapons, but it also has an impact on spellcasting time, as well as helping to mitigate damage while falling. The other thing to mention with luck is luck will also govern item discovery, but it also has quite a large impact on building up bleed damage. So luck follows the same scaling with going up to 40, followed by 60, and then all the way up to 99, similar to strength and dex. Now, intelligence and faith are a little bit different. Intelligence, of course, impacting sorceries primarily, while faith primarily impacts your miracles. But both pyromancies and hexes will scale off both intelligence and faith. So for pyromancies or hexes in general, I would aim to get both of them up to at least 40. You'll see your best returns right around that point. And if you have the stats to go higher, feel free to. But in general, for a caster build, you're not going to really see your big jump in damage until you hit the 40 intelligence mark. Whereas hitting 40 with strength or dex is a very nice point, and going up to 60 is a little bit more, but it doesn't really feel needed. In intelligence or faith, 40 is where you're going to begin seeing your largest returns, and until you take it all the way up to 60, you won't really see the pure potential of that build. So keep that in mind with doing magic builds. You're going to want to aim for 60 intelligence, and on the flip side with doing faith builds, you'd want to aim for about 60 faith. Of course, as I mentioned previously, for dark damage based builds or pyromancy type builds, you could take intelligence and faith both up to around 40, and you should begin to see very comfortable amounts of damage at that point. So now that we've gone over the stats, let's look at this build briefly. So, with this build right now, we are at soul level 100, and the three primary stats you're going to notice are Vigor, Endurance, and Strength, which I all have up to 40. Of course, I have 5 extra strength coming in from the Knight's Ring, and then some boosts to my HP, Stamina, and Maximum Equipment Load with my Ring of Favor, as well as a boost to Maximum Equipment Load with Havel's Ring. But with that being said, we are very comfortable. As you can see, we have over 1600 HP. We are below the 70% threshold, even with having our Great Machete on, as well as the Grass Crest Shield for extra stamina, in addition to a Leather Shield, because I'm terrible at parrying with medium weight shields. But with that being said, this is only a pure build. So even though this build is very comfortable to play, I have plenty of stamina, I have plenty of health, and I am below my weight cap, it only has a focal point on one area, in this case being strength. So what would happen if we wanted to be a quality or magic type build instead? Switching gears now, we're going to take a look at my Pyromancer. And as you can see, this build I ended up going up to 120 to be comfortable, whereas the strength build I was fine at level 100. The main stats I had to hit here were 17 dex for a weapon requirement, 40-40 in int and faith to see solid damage on my pyros, and 24 attunement for 4 cast slots. At the same time, my vigor and endurance took a hit in comparison to the strength build, with them both being left down at 30. Now you may be wondering why I don't just level up higher to hit those thresholds I previously mentioned. After all, I could take vigor up to 50, endurance to 40, int and faith both up to 60 for a damage boost, add in more attunement for another cast slot, but if I go and do all the aforementioned, suddenly I'm soul level 196. Now while that would make one hell of a scary Pyromancer, at that point the character becomes too good at what I wanted it to do without having to make any sacrifices. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the exact reason why the meta exists. By having a level agreed upon as a natural stopping point in progression, the community can see plenty of build variety and differences between characters without everyone running around as high-level jack-of-all-trades type of builds. So to finally answer the question you've all been waiting for, my thoughts after putting in over 250 hours into Dark Souls 3 is that the meta should be at 120. While I was comfortable stopping at 100 on both my strength and dex builds, I found it necessary to go up to 120 for my Pyromancer, sorcery, and faith builds to become comfortably functional. Additionally, even though I felt fine in the strength build at SL 100, I could easily add another 20 points between vigor and strength to make it an even stronger pure build without experiencing any downsides. So before we bring this video to a close, one last point I want to make is that if you don't care about cooperation or invasions, and you only do plan on playing with a password, feel free to level up as much as you want. As I mentioned, the whole reason of the meta is for online connectivity, and that requirement is removed if a password's in place. So if you're the type of person who is only going to play Dark Souls with 2 or 3 buddies, you know, have a blast. Level all the way up, make giant heavy armor wearing gods that can cast every magic in the game. But honestly, I feel you're going to be missing out on quite a bit because, you know, invasions and co-op with people you just met is really what makes Dark Souls so much fun. So, before we close things out, one last thing I want to say is that the build videos a lot of you have been asking about will be coming soon. So if you're curious about the 2 builds you got to see briefly today, make sure to stay tuned for those. And with that being said, we will see you all then.